All right, so let's get into this. It's a pretty wild story. You ever stop and think, how in the world did a bunch of really dense, kind of radical French philosophy completely take over the American mind? I mean, this isn't just some dusty academic tale. We're talking about a genuine virus of ideas that found the absolute perfect host in the chaotic, searching, and yeah, pretty weird culture of 1970s America.
You know, the French thinker Michel Foucault basically asked this exact same question. And it's really the question at the heart of our whole story today. What was this productive nodal point in American culture he's talking about? What made the soil so fertile for these foreign ideas to not just land, but to actually take root and morph into something brand new?
To get to the bottom of it, we've got to go back to the 70s. And we need to ditch that old idea of it just being a hangover from the 60s. The reality was way more complex. It was this deeply paradoxical decade, a time when political burnout created this powerful and sometimes kind of strange search for meaning.
Right, so this idea of a cultural void is everything here. All that massive organized protest energy from the 60s, well, it had kind of fizzled out. But that energy, that desire for change, it didn't just vanish into thin air. It was floating around, looking for a new place to land, a new language to speak. And it found it on college campuses and deep in the counterculture. So this is the really crucial shift we need to understand. How did America go from these massive collective political movements to this much more individual personal search for meaning? To see how, we really have to trace the rise and fall of the student movement that totally defined the 60s.
So this timeline, it really shows you just how fast everything changed. The decade kicks off with the incredible moral power of the Greensboro sit-ins. Then, boom, 1962, you've got groups like SDS talking about participatory democracy. By 64, Berkeley's exploding with the free speech movement. But then, you can see the cracks forming. By 68, the whole thing is splintering. And then comes the big one, May 1970, the shootings at Kent State and Jackson State. I mean, that just stopped everything cold. The party was over. The entire political movement was basically shut down, right then and there.
And this comparison just lays it all out perfectly. The very specific, organized political goals of the 60s. They kind of gave way to something totally different. The fight against the war was replaced by a demand for sexual liberation. Big political protests were swapped for psychedelic exploration. That collective we of the movement started dissolving into the radical I of the 70s.
Okay, so into this void, this new landscape of personal searching and political frustration, that's when our virus shows up. A whole new set of super challenging, really radical ideas started trickling in from France, and they found the absolute perfect environment to start replicating and spreading like wildfire. So what exactly is this French theory? Well, it's not really one single thing. It's more like a whole toolkit of radical critiques. You had these thinkers who started questioning everything we just took for granted. The idea of a stable self, the authority of the author, and all the hidden ways power works in our society. You can imagine, for a generation that was totally disillusioned with politics as usual, these ideas were like lightning.
But here's what's so cool. The way these ideas spread is just as important as the ideas themselves. This was not some top-down, official academic movement. Not at first, anyway. It was almost clandestine. We're talking about kind of clunky, unauthorized translations being printed on those old mimeograph machines, stapled together, and passed hand-to-hand like secret political pamphlets. It was totally DIY, super passionate, and a real alternative to the old-school Marxist thinking that had been dominant.
And the people involved were incredibly self-aware. I love this little poem. It was published in one of the key journals back then, and it just captures the whole vibe perfectly. It was this weird, amazing mix of super serious theory and this playful, almost sarcastic understanding of how absurd it could all seem. They were totally in on the joke.
Now, you might think these brainy academic ideas would just blend right in with the American counterculture. You know, rock and roll, beat poetry, experimental art. But the reality? Oh, it was way messier. It was what our source material calls a missed encounter.
I mean, the interest was definitely there on both sides. Thinkers like Foucault and Deleuze, they were completely fascinated by the raw creative energy of American artists like William Burroughs and Allen Ginsberg. And the American avant-garde was really intrigued by these new European theories. But when they actually tried to get together in the same room, well, that's a whole other story.
And this anecdote, oh man, you can't make this stuff up. It's from a conference in 1975, and it was meant to be this huge meeting of the minds, right? Instead, the philosopher Deleuze gets up to speak and immediately gets heckled and called a phallocrat. Then Foucault, he gets accused of being a CIA agent.
a CIA agent. I mean, you can just picture it. The French thinkers were apparently just stunned. They literally fled to the Chelsea Hotel and basically said, "We're out." Foucault was furious, calling it the last countercultural event of the 60s. Just a total chaotic mess.
So if these direct meetings were a total disaster, how did the virus really manage to spread? Well, the answer lies in this groundbreaking journal that lived right on the border between the university and the underground, a publication called Semiotexti.
Its founder, Silver Lautringer, was a professor at Columbia, but his mission was anything but academic. He basically used his position inside the ivory tower to create this space that would deliberately poke fun at and totally subvert academic rules, all to get these explosive ideas out to a way bigger audience. And you just have to look at the style of this journal. It was one of a kind. They were running fake ads for electric chairs, messing with all the visual codes, publishing these tweaked comic strips. In the exact same issue, you could find a super dense essay by a philosopher next to prison writings from a terrorist. Yeah, this was not your typical scholarly journal. It was built to appeal to, as they said, punks, artists, and eggheads alike.
And guess what? It totally worked. When Semiotext started publishing these little inexpensive, portable theory books they called their little black books, they had a massive hit on their hands. Their version of Baudrillard's Simulations sold more than 20,000 copies. That was all the proof they needed. They had successfully smuggled high theory out of the university and right into the hands of a whole new generation.
Which brings us to our final and maybe most surprising point. What if this thing that we all call French theory isn't actually French at all?
And there's the punchline, coming straight from Silver Lautringer, the guy who helped kick the whole thing off. He argued that the very label French theory was an American invention. It was a brand, a package created here in the US to help us understand and use these ideas for our own very American purposes.
So here's the bottom line. These French ideas weren't just passively absorbed. The American context, that political burnout, that existential searching, that wild counterculture, it fundamentally reshaped them. They became a tool for American artists and activists and students to make sense of their own world. In the end, they became a uniquely American thing.
And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. This whole story happened in an age of mimeographs and underground magazines. Today, ideas spread at the speed of light. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the viruses of ideas zipping through our culture right now? And how is our own unique moment in history twisting and changing them in ways we probably can't even see yet?